They glisten in the flashing light of his maddened mind, so clear, so perfect. The stuff that dreams are made of. Dreams of hope, unity, love, and harmony. These are the dreams of his father. His name is David Haller, but you might know him by another name. Legion. He is the son of the mutant known as Charles Xavier. For a long time, he has been in a coma. His body wastes away at one of the best hospitals in Tel Aviv, but his mind lives on elsewhere. With a woman long dead that he killed himself. Her name is Destiny, or at least it was. She has seen David's dream, and there is still hope for it. If only his father had been given a real chance to fulfill the dream they share. David wakes up, wondering what Destiny meant. The problem with dreams is they tend to fade. Nightmares, on the other hand. Nightmares can linger. David wanders through the desert. He has no idea where he is going, but for the first time in his life, he has purpose, a goal, a dream. David was driven insane by his overwhelming mental power, and he became known as Legion. But he's changed. He is healed and whole. Not entirely sane, he has a destiny. Only he can make the world right, the way it was always meant to be. Much like his son, Xavier has dreams too. Tonight he has an encounter with one of his oldest friends, and perhaps his worst enemy. The dream is set in Israel, a place the two men remember well. These were the happiest times of their lives. Young, naive, and with vastly different ideologies, the two men were sure they could look past their differences. But what always happened. Reality got in the way. Sides were taken. Magneto asks Xavier if he ever wonders what could have been, had he not stood in the way of Charles over all these years. How much time did the two waste fighting one another, instead of helping their own race? Charles replies such thoughts are insane. The world wouldn't automatically be a better place if Magneto just disappeared. But Eric replies that's exactly what he thinks. Magneto created a disruptive environment of conflict where it should have been collaboration and peace. Charles insists that, for better or worse, this is simply the way things are. There's no changing that. David, however, disagrees. Charles is woken up by Beast. Thanking Hank for breaking David's hold on him, he says they need to prepare themselves as he just survived an attack. Xavier's son Legion has returned, but he's going to be more dangerous than ever before. Charles could detect his son has become whole, healed, and finally combined into one entity. With a mind potentially more powerful than his own, now focused and undamaged, things aren't looking good, to say the least. Meanwhile, Mystique and X-Force find themselves face to face with the reawakened David. He's not surprised to see Mystique, as Destiny said she would be coming. However, this is an unexpected turn of events for Raven, but she still will not let it deter her from her revenge. She strikes out at the boy, but he has no difficulty knocking her back. Mystique refuses to relent. David killed Destiny, her friend, and she vows to avenge the woman, even if she has to chase him to the ends of the earth. X-Force tries to intervene, but they are unable to do so, and Mystique slips from their grasp. Wolfsbane chases after the fugitive, while the exertion makes the still recovering David lay back in his bed. David's mother, Gabrielle, comes in and comforts him, overjoyed at the changes in the young man. For the first time in a long time, he's calling her mother, and his alternate personalities seem to have vanished. In his dreams, David encounters Destiny once more. He apologizes for killing her, but she understands it's not his fault. In fact, she'd rather he not let the guilt get to him. The burden has already set David on a course that will change all of reality forever. She does, however, insist the young man deliver her message to Mystique. David seems reluctant to do so, but promises that everything will be okay. He's going to make it all better. The young man wakes up ranting about how he will make his father happy once again, worrying his mother. She goes outside to talk with Forge about it for a moment, but when they return to his room, he is gone. Not long after this, X-Force corners Mystique when David approaches them, asking to talk to Raven. But they'll need to do this somewhere quiet, and the young man knows the perfect place. Raven finds herself transported within David's own mind. He reveals Destiny's message, that she loves Raven, but must be wary of times not shared, hearts not loved, and destinies not written. With a single blow, Mystique lay defeated in body and mind. Seeing this, X-Force springs into action, but they are no match for David, and he easily sends them away. Mystique demands David explain himself, but he only says he has to go now and fix everything. He leaves her alone to dwell on what has happened. A short time later, the X-Men arrived in Israel on Xavier's orders. They meet up with Gabrielle, who takes them to the briefing room. The mutants can't help but notice many soldiers wounded along the way, and an ominous black sphere in the distance. She explains the situation with David. They've tried everything to get past the barrier the boy has erected around him, but to no avail. Everything explodes or gives out the second it gets close to this strange anomaly. Storm promises to do whatever it takes, whatever the risk. They're going to get in and take control of the situation. With some difficulty, they are able to fly themselves through David's barrier, where Legion eagerly confronts what he calls his step-siblings. The mutants find themselves easily overpowered by David, who hardly has any difficulty against them. Toying with them, he sends himself and Storm through time, simply to taunt her before bringing them back to the present. David explains that his plan is to travel back in time to an important moment in mutant history, and change things for the better. At these words, Bishop attacks, all too familiar with the terrible effects of time travel, but he cannot handle the level of time-traveling energies currently flowing around David. However, Iceman and Jean Grey reveal Bishop was just a distraction, and they hit him with everything they've got. The X-Men regroup, but David is far from stopped. He begins heading back in time, finally finding that critical moment he was looking for. In a desperate move, Storm has Psylocke make a psychic link with Bishop's mind. With Bishop having absorbed enough of David's energy, the X-Men have successfully tethered themselves to David, except for Jean Grey. She watches, helplessly, as David and her friends are pulled through time. Jean is left alone and contacts Charles. She tells him what has happened, but she's running out of energy from the fight. As Xavier calls out to her, she falls unconscious. Meanwhile, far, far away, on the Shiar throne world known as Chandelar, the palace silently orbits this alien planet. Lilandra Nuramani, Majestrix of the Shiar Empire, sleeps peacefully for the first time in the weeks since she was forced to separate with the man she loves, Charles Xavier. Sadly, it does not last. Lilandra is surprised to find her guardian Gladiator has been knocked unconscious. The intruder, a being named Jaff, apologizes, but says there's no time to talk his way past the guards. The Empress does not understand this, as Jaff is never supposed to leave his post. His duty, to protect the Macran crystal, the nexus of all reality, is a sacred task of utmost importance. But that's exactly the problem. If they don't act, pretty soon there won't be a reality to protect. Rogue and Angel are then dispatched to find Jean, but they're having trouble pinpointing her. The rest of the X-Men have been brought in on the scene, and with the cooperation of the Israeli government, they are eventually able to find their fallen comrade. The others, however, are long gone. Jean is revived and explains exactly what happened, but they have no idea where Legion or the others went. She only knows one thing for sure, that they are somewhere in the past. 20 years ago, the other X-Men are trying to piece things together, but the journey has scrambled their memories, so they have no idea why they are here or what they are supposed to do. Elsewhere, Eric Lenscher looks over a patient. The stranger's name is unknown, but the John Doe is stirring. The young man says he can feel the anger burning inside the person that will one day call himself Magneto, and Legion begins to assault him telepathically. David feels Eric's agony, unable to comprehend how someone could survive such pain every day. Tormented by these memories, Magnus demands that David stop this at once. He leaves in a huff as David calls out to him, confused and sorry for his actions. It seems that, like the X-Men, David has no memory after making the journey. Out in the streets, the Charles and Gabrielle of the past take a walk through a market, though they are stopped when Xavier vaguely detects Magnus calling out to him, and sure enough, his friend comes running up to them a moment later. He explains what happens, and the two of them go back and find David sprawled out on the floor. Xavier tries to help the stranger, and wonders just what kind of madness they have gotten themselves involved in. In the present, Charles calls in some reinforcements, and in no time at all, Cable and Domino arrive. They begin to brief the two, but the Israeli forces attempt to arrest Cable, as the mutant is wanted for crimes against the state. Things get tense, but the standoff is interrupted when the sky erupts in lightning. Lilandra appears before everyone, and declares that David is threatening all of reality. Charles is shocked at this and asks how she knows that his son could possibly be such a threat. She replies she got the information from a very reliable source. Back in the past, Xavier explains his radical new ideas of Homo superior to a skeptical Eric. Magnus is doubtful that such beings could even exist, but the two men are happy to have met one another regardless. The way Charles talks, Magnus thinks they could do anything together. When one of the barmen begins tormenting a disabled patron, Xavier and Eric step in, causing a massive fight they easily win. Magnus is impressed by his new friend, and the two agree that any dream worth having is a dream worth fighting for. According to Lilandra, Legion stands to shatter the McCran crystal unless the X-Men in the past can stop him. But there's no telling what has happened to their minds hitching a ride with Legion. So, with the help of the Shiar, the X-Men have rigged a device to send Cable's mind back in time, thanks to the mutant's unique and latent time travel abilities. Cable will have to telepathically contact the X-Men and remind them of this critical mission. With nothing else they can do, the team activates the device. Back in time, the others have set themselves up with jobs while Psylocke unsuccessfully tries to piece their memories back together. Nerves between the group are wearing thin as the situation is becoming more and more frustrating. Meanwhile, Eric affirms his desires to see Charles' dream come true one day. The two men agree to go back to the hospital. Xavier will tend to his lover, Gabrielle, while Magnus will investigate this strange new patient further. The abilities of this John Doe are promising, and they could represent the exact type of Homo superior Charles had been theorizing about. At the hospital, David sees his mother, recognizing her as his memories begin to resurface. She sees him, but he is able to disguise himself as his father. David asks if she thinks Xavier could do anything he sets his mind to, and she says that he could. He thinks so too, that if Charles set his mind to anything, he can make the world a truly better place. Gabrielle is confused by him, but David is now certain of what he must do. Without any enemies to bar his way, Charles could do anything, or take anything he wanted. As the real Charles Xavier heads to the hospital, he detects something happening to Gabrielle. He and Xavier rush off to find her. Not far from this, Bishop is working away when Cable appears before him. However, before Nathan can act, he's frozen in place by Iceman. Not recognizing the men, the X-Men are worried that he might be hostile. Cable doesn't have time to explain though, so he just touches Bishop, sending a chain telepathic message to the entire group. Cable urges them to stop Legion and begs them to remember, before he is pulled back into the present. Over at the hospital, Eric and Charles find Gabrielle unconscious, with a fully powered Legion standing before them. David apologizes, but says that Eric is destined to become the greatest villain the world has ever known, and he is not going to let that happen. In the present, Scott Summers looks over Cable. He is knocked back when Nathan returns from the past. The mutant is not exactly sure what happened to him, so he agrees to let Charles try and untangle his memory of the whole affair. Xavier obliges, affirming that Cable made it to the past and delivered the warning successfully. All they can do now is wait, and hope. Gambit is not happy with this and gets into a shouting match with Cable, while Domino and Rogue nearly come to blows when one of them tries to intervene. Before things turn violent, however, Cyclops has them stand down. Everyone is under a lot of pressure right now, but fighting won't solve anything. 20 years ago, the X-Men stand with their memories recovered, and an insane scene playing out before them. Eric is using his powers at a time when he shouldn't even be aware of them, but they seem to activate naturally as a defense against Legion. This is all wrong. They have to act now before it is too late. Meanwhile, Xavier recovers from David's attack. He realizes this is the dawn of the Homo Superior that he dreamed of, although he couldn't have possibly imagined things would be so dramatic. Still new to his own powers, Xavier is surprised when Psylocke contacts him for help. He knocks out Gabrielle for her own safety and finds the young woman who will one day be his student. The sight renders him speechless. An Asian telepath with a British accent, a black giant absorbing mountains of energy, a being made of pure ice, and a woman he recognizes as a young girl who stole from him only a few weeks ago. Xavier imagined there could be others out there like him, but this is a lot to handle at once. Not wanting to interfere with the past events any more than they already have, the X-Men brush off inquiries into their own identities, and explain that Legion is here to kill Magnus. However, Xavier is able to use his telepathy to deduce they are from the future, and that David is his son. Meanwhile, the battle is being watched over by Apocalypse. He is so pleased. It is all beginning, though a decade earlier than his sinister associate predicted. At long last, it is time to bloom. The Order of Ascension begins now. May the strongest survive. Magnus is struggling against David. The boy is angry and cannot be reasoned with. While Eric is still very new to all of it, Legion is stronger than he's ever been before. Eric is also completely confused, understandably. While the X-Men explain to Xavier exactly what is going on, Eric collapses from the strain of the battle, and Storm is forced to catch the man mid-air. Frustrated, Iceman launches himself at David, freezing Legion in solid ice down to the molecule. Bishop is shocked at this, not knowing that Bobby is quite powerful when he wants to be. However, Psylocke can detect David's thoughts are still active, and this fight is not over. David is able to telepathically knock everyone down before escaping from the ice. Finally, it's time. He will have his way. He did it. It's just him and Magneto now. David will fix it all. He's going to make the world so much better. Besides, how could it possibly get any worse? And all he has to do... Xavier's last action saves his friend, but at a terrible cost. For a moment, Charles gets a vision of all that could have been. The X-Men that almost were, but now, are gone. David realizes he has made a terrible mistake. He just undid his own life. He just ruined everything. The X-Men and David are wiped from existence in an instant, except for one man, Bishop, who is unaffected thanks to his unique physiology and history. Meanwhile, Magnus cradles his friend, shocked and touched by the noble deed. From that day on, things would never be the same. In the present, galaxy after galaxy is being crystallized and destroyed. There is little time left before the entire universe will shatter, and the Shiar can do nothing but stand by and watch. With things looking bad and nothing to do, Angel goes to talk with Beast. If the world is really ending, he wants Hank to know that he's always been a good friend. The best, really. Beast is at a loss of words, but one does come to mind. Thanks. The couples of the group, Rogue and Gambit, Jean and Scott, and Cable and Domino, all share some last moments with one another too. Jean and Scott run into Xavier, who says it's all out of their hands now. He wonders if he ever really made a difference in the world, and his two students reassure him that he made the X-Men, and if they are any indication of his work, then nobody can doubt the man's value. Charles feels much better and thanks his two students. The Summers then go to talk to Nathan and reveal something they've been hiding for some time. Cable is their son. He smirks at this, revealing he's known this fact for some time, but figured they would tell him when they were ready. They share a touching moment together where Cable expresses gratitude at being given a family in this time period, and he tells them he doesn't regret for a single moment being their son. With that, Charles gathers his friends and students before him, offering one final message of thanks, and one final goodbye. If this is really it, he will miss his X-Men. He was proud to know them all. It all began with 5 students, 5 colorful names, 5 yellow costumes, and one dream. Their ranks swelled. Some died, some married, some had kids. But no matter where they went or what they did, they always took the badge with them. That simple X. The X that bonded them together as a family. The X that drove them to the noblest of causes. The X that signified their dream of unity. And now, the dream that ends. And all that is left is the memory of what might have been. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is the complete story of Age of Apocalypse, Part 1. Well, dear viewers, this is it. I've been meaning to do this one for some time. This was supposed to come out for the movie, but clearly I didn't quite meet that goal. But that's okay, because I really wanted to do this story right, and every time I tried to get a handle on the damn thing, it always spiraled out of control. The problem is this event is just a really tough story to broach. Doing it all in one video would have made the thing either way too light on details for my liking or impossibly long for me to reasonably deal with from a production standpoint. And though I'm sure some of you would have really liked one long, single, super detailed video, breaking it into parts lets us handle this thing at a much more easier pace. It also allows us to do things like spend an entire video on the events leading up to the Age of Apocalypse, which is exactly what we're doing here. I felt like it's important to do this for a few reasons. One, this sort of stuff usually is skipped in the collected editions or summaries because it's really important for explaining how this world came to be, and why it isn't just some alternate universe. This is the world of the X-Men changed and transformed beyond recognition. And the end result is pretty awesome. Age of Apocalypse is one of the first stories I've ever read in the comic book world, right alongside Civil War and Secret War, and it was part of the unholy trinity of awesomeness that kinda got me into comics to begin with. This entire thing is going to be great. It's one of the best depictions of an alternate universe ever, and one of my all-time favorite comic series to come out of the 90s. It's well drawn, remarkably well detailed and thought out, and is a bit of an emotional roller coaster, filled with real drama, dark themes, and some pretty solid action. Here, the Legion Quest arc that sets it all up really impressed me. I never read this part of the story until now. Like most people, I skipped right on ahead to the actual start of the story. But I think Legion Quest is a really solid way to start talking about Age of Apocalypse. It very cleverly hints at what's to come without giving the game away, while also telling a pretty good story on its own. Could you imagine reading this thing in the 90s, and reality just shatters all upon you, and then Age of Apocalypse comes? It must have been really cool seeing it all unfold. It's also important to see the X-Men as they were before we see what they will become in this new world. That's another reason this prologue stuff is so important, so it can underlie just how many big changes we're about to experience, but it also gives us a bit of a barometer of where the X-Men were before this Age of Apocalypse business. Because this is a story like no other, and I want to give you guys an idea of the full scale and scope of this story. If you haven't read these comics yet, you should probably change that right away. Although that being said, the third and final reason I'm doing Age of Apocalypse like this is unlike most big comic book events, it's really hard to piece these comics together in an order that totally makes sense. In spite of all the collected graphic novels and the omnibus, I'm just not all that satisfied with how Marvel collects the Age of Apocalypse in trade. The reason for that is that a lot of these comics occur parallel to one another, with the events rather seamlessly flowing from comic to comic. It can make for a confusing read, but that's kind of why we're here, to help bridge these gaps. In fact, if you've read Legion Quest, you might notice the ordering and exact nature of how I did this is a little bit different from if you actually read the comics in order. That's because I have the advantage of not being tied to them event by event, and I can kind of make it work in a direction a little bit better than the actual story. So there's value in seeing this even if you've read all these comics before. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.